Let us start with this slide that every tooth which is there in the oral cavity, it remains in its position because of the equilibrium associated with the forces acting on that tooth. Like from mesial, distal and occlusal, there are teeth present. From buccal side, the cheek is present. From lingual side, the tongue is present, and from the apical, bone. So all of these tissues are exerting forces on the tooth, and that helps the tooth to maintain its position. If any of these forces is missing from any of the sides, say a tooth lost from mesial side, the other forces keep on acting on the tooth, and the tooth drifts into the direction in which the force is not applied. If the child has a microglossia, there are chances that the teeth may drift lingually and the arch can collapse. Let us take an example what happens if first deciduous molar has been lost. As we can see in the picture, there are chances that the second molar will drift mesially, the canine will move distally, and the upper molar will supraid up. So these kind of disruptions or disturbances occur when a particular tooth is lost prematurely. As a result, we get to see. Now, why are we discussing these issues? Because we need to know the rationale behind learning about space maintenance. We need to know the significance of learning about space maintenance or significance of placement of space maintenance or space management in pediatric dentistry. So, if the loss of teeth, loss of tooth occur prematurely, there are chances of movements of the teeth which leads to drifting or tipping of the teeth as it is seen here or in this particular radiograph. I hope you are able to see this cursor, the green cursor. Once the first permanent molars start drifting mesially, there is something called loss of arch length, which is the most important point if we have to maintain the permanent dentition in alignment. Loss of arch length followed by crowding of the permanent dentition. Here in this picture we can say that crowding, malpositioning of the teeth that starts taking place. This can lead to impaction of certain permanent teeth, and overall it leads to malocclusion if these changes occur in the anterior teeth, because if the first deciduous molar has been lost, if canine has been lost, there are chances that the incisors might as well shift their places, and that can lead to shift in the midline. All these problems are the result of premature loss of teeth where no further care has been taken. And here in these situations, the space maintenance come into action, and the space maintenance or space maintenance has to be used. The definition of space maintenance is it is a fixed or a removable appliance which is designed to preserve the space created by premature loss of a primary tooth or a group of teeth. Or it also can be defined as the appliance or appliances used to maintain space or regain minor amounts of space lost so as to guide the uninterrupted tooth into a proper position in the arch. And space maintenance overall, these are the measures or the procedures that are brought into use following premature loss of primary teeth or tooth to prevent loss of space, improve arch development and maintain the arch length so that the permanent teeth erupt into proper alignment. As there are so many classifications available for the space maintenance, it is comparable to classifications available for traumatic injuries of anterior teeth. So there are certain classifications which classify the space maintenance into removable or fixed. Now before we move on to the actual classification, we need to know the meanings of terminologies. So removable and fixed, as we don't need to know much about it. The space maintenance can be passive or active. Passive space maintenance are those which do not exert any force on the teeth, while active are those which exert some amount of force on the teeth. Functional and non-functional. Functional means the space maintainer which is able to carry out the functions of teeth, especially speech, mastication and aesthetics, while non-functional are the space maintainers which do not carry out any such functions by the teeth. The removable space maintainers can also be classified under cast partial and rod partial. The fixed can again be classified under banded and bonded. Those which use band and those which are bonded to the tooth structure using some adhesive material. Another simple classification which was given by Hitchcock, it classifies the space maintenance into removable, fixed or semi-fixed, with bands or without bands, functional or non-functional, active or passive, and combinations. As I explained it earlier, that the functional and active passive, if we know the meaning, it is easier for us to understand what does it mean. There is another classification given by Hinrichsen. All these classifications, again, they differentiate the fixed space maintainer and the removable space maintainer. So, let me go to the further slide so that we can concentrate on the actual space maintenance or space maintenance. The ideal requirements of any space maintainer are as follows. The space maintainer should maintain the desired mesiodistal dimension of lost tooth precise. It should not interfere with the eruption, the vertical eruption of adjacent or opposing tooth. Ideally, it should be functional, should not interfere with speech or mastication. It should help maintain the individual functional movement of the teeth. It should be simple and strong, should be easily cleansable, and should not restrict normal growth and development. Now, looking at all these ideal requirements, no artificial space maintainer is able to fulfill all these requirements. So, the best space maintainer will always be a primary tooth. And that's the reason why a dentist or a pediatric dentist should always try to save the natural tooth, the primary tooth, so that it remains functional as a space maintainer. We have to discuss a few factors which are considered prior to placement of a space maintainer. The first factor is time elapsed since loss of the tooth. It has been found that most space closure usually occurs in the initial couple of months after the extraction of the tooth. The significance of this statement is that we have to place the space maintainer as soon as the tooth has been extracted. Because if you think of placing the space maintainer after 2 months, after 3 months, come back after 1 month, come back after 3 months, in fact, this is going to cause some amount of tooth loss. In fact, in case of maxillary tooth, it can be a great space loss. So, it is always important, or rather it is mandatory, whenever the tooth is extracted, and if it is indicated for maintenance of space, the space maintainer should be placed as possible, or as early, as soon as possible after the extraction. Next is dental age of the patient or stage of development. So it has been found So whenever we have a maxillary tooth being considered for extraction, a maxillary molar, then it becomes very important for us to think of space maintenance at the earliest possible. While if we are removing the anterior teeth, we can take certain amount of time, we can afford spending certain amount of time thinking whether we should place a space maintenance or not. But in case of maxillary and that too posteriorly, the amount of space closure is very high, so the space maintenance is should be considered at the earliest possible. Then, direction of closure of space. Fourth point. It has been found that the maxillary posteriors, they move easily when there is an extraction space created. The posterior molars move easily, while mandibular, if we have an extraction space available in the mandibular or in the lower dentition, the mandibular molars move easily as well as the anteriors move distally. So in this case, this is one point which needs attention while thinking about the maintenance of space. First point is eruption timing of permanent successors. It has been found that the tooth erupts when 2/3 or 3/4 of its root is complete. Now this is important because we get to see many students, many interns, many dentists who think the chronological age as the sole determinant to decide whether a space maintenance is to be given or not. Always remember that the tooth erupts only and only when the root completion is there, regardless of the child's chronological age. So the child might be completing 10 years or 11 years or 12 years of chronological age, but if the roots do not show the complete formation, then the tooth will take time for eruption, and meanwhile a space maintenance placement is a must. Same applies to the next point, that is amount of bone covering the unerupted tooth. If there is bone covering the permanent tooth, it is going to take time for eruption of the permanent tooth. It has been said that it takes around 4 to 5 months for the tooth to move through 1 millimeter of bone. So if there is around 4 to 5 millimeters of bone, the tooth is going to take 16 to 20 months from now to erupt. And in that case, space maintenance is required. Space maintenance is to be placed at the earliest possible, and this is irrespective of the chronological age of the child. Then sequence of eruption of teeth. For example, if I'll give you an example. If the second here in this OPG, the second primary molar needs extraction, and if we see the second permanent molar is erupting here, if it is ahead of the second premolar, then after extraction of this tooth, the second molar will surely press the first molar mesially, and that will lead to faster space loss. And this is a situation where space maintenance is an emergency situation, or space maintenance should be considered not emergency, but space maintenance is should be considered at the earliest possible as an intervention. Then delayed eruption of permanent tooth, maybe because of a few factors, maybe because the permanent tooth is deviated from its normal eruption path, or there is some anomaly present. If we find that the permanent tooth is getting delayed, maybe because of certain periapical lesion that leads to displacement of the permanent tooth. So if such a thing has occurred, in that case, extraction of the primary tooth followed by a space maintenance is warranted. Next factor is congenital absence of permanent tooth. Now this is one factor where we have to take a call whether a space maintenance is to be given, or we should allow the space loss by permitting the distal molar mesially. So it is the clinical decision depending on multiple factors. If we make a decision that a space has to be maintained till all other teeth erupt and later the lost part receives prosthetic implant, then the space maintenance should be placed. Or else, if we decide to normal habits. So sometimes when, for example, if the canine has been lost and even at permanent canine is about to erupt, maybe or it is going to take 6 months for eruption, and if the child has a lip sucking habit, then the strong mentalist muscle pattern can have a pronounced negative effect. In case of loss of canines, in case of loss of molars, and that can lead to the distal movement of the anteriors. So this is one factor which has to be considered by planning for a space maintenance, and in such cases also placement of space maintenance along with the intervention